Hello, everybody. Welcome to Brain Club. I'm Mel Hauser. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the executive director of All Brains Belong. Let me share screen, get us oriented to our conversation. Okay, so, and Sierra and Lizzie, if you could keep covering the waiting room, that'd be awesome. Thank you. So welcome. Tonight we're going to do our monthly Brain Club book chat on Anchored by Deb Dana. Before we begin, closed captioning is enabled. You just have to toggle it on if you'd like to use it. Depending on your version of Zoom, you might see the live transcript closed captioning icon. If not, look for the more ... and choose show subtitles, or you can do the same and choose hide subtitles if you want to turn them off. If you're new to Brain Club, welcome. If you're coming back, welcome back. So Brain Club, if you're new, this is our weekly community education program for purposes of demonstrating All Brains Belong's approach to neuro-inclusive culture. It's our hope that by shifting broader awareness of the issues of concern and importance to the neurodivergent community, this is that we can learn together and unlearn together and hopefully promote new ways of thinking and being. And thus we can go forth into the rest of our lives and model it. And that's how culture change happens. While we hope that this is a place where you will feel safe and supported right from your very first time, this is not a support group. It is not for medical and mental health advice, even when we have topics of conversation like the nervous system. It is still not for mental health or medical advice. It is not a place to make personalized requests or address personalized needs. It's also not a neurodivergent affinity space. This is a place where all people are invited to come and to learn and observe what a neuro-inclusive space looks like and think about how hopefully what you're learning connects to your life. There is no one right way to participate here at Brain Club. You can have your video on or off. Even when it's on, we don't expect anything of you. Feel free to walk or move or fidget or stem or take breaks. Just do what needs doing. During we may have time for discussion after our pre-recorded portion. If we get to discussion, you're welcome to do so with mouth words or in the chat. We'll have the chat open throughout our pre-recorded time together. You don't have to do any of those things. Observation is a completely valid form of participation. And in addition to affirming all aspects of identity, this is a program oriented around the group's collective needs. We think about the collective needs outweighing that of any individual. So I'm not even, sorry, waiting room. I don't know if anybody's on it. Here we go. Welcome, everybody. So we're going to watch about 35 minutes of it's partially me going through slides on video because many of you may remember we covered this book in January. We're going to introduce it a little bit differently in connection to our monthly topic. But we don't think we can do better than how we did it in January. So we're going to play the beginning of that. We're gonna look at some quotes from the book. We're gonna also listen to the author talk on video. That's my visual support to make sure I can see the chat, which I cannot. Where's the chat? There it is. It's always a surprise when I can find the things. Oh, thanks, Lizzie. Lizzie put in the chat our full community agreement. Speaking of the chat, you are welcome to use the chat throughout Brain Club tonight. It's a great place to validate other people's comments or share how something being shared has impacted you. We just ask that if you're going to use the chat, we ask that you use the big box, down at the bottom, as opposed to the reply threads, because what happens with that, and sometimes it's not a big deal, but especially when the chat is really well used, it bounces up and down, and then I get dizzy, and I definitely can't keep up with them, and I definitely can't respond. So it just, I ask because of my access needs as a facilitator, if you could please use the big box instead of the reply threads, that would be really helpful to me. Thank you. If it is your first time at Brain Club, it's okay not to understand what's happening. Please just keep coming. It might take several times to figure out the logistics, and Lizzie's going to put in the chat some of the frequently asked questions. All right, so we are all month long, we have been talking about trust. We've looked at trust in relationships and why so many of us have a hard time with trust. We also looked at how that applies to healthcare and the workplace. And when we really think about it, it's really difficult to talk about trust without talking about the nervous system, which is why we wanted to reintroduce this book, Anchored by Deb Dana, that we'll tell you more about in a minute. Just wanted to preview next month's Brain Club, Rest as Resistance. We're going to be looking at barriers to rest. What happens when we do not rest because of all of the societal barriers? We're going to talk about societal barriers as we try to do at Brain Club. Trying to undo the ways in which rest is often talked about as like an individual thing, individual self-care or whatever. We're going to talk about the collective and like what is the societal factors that impact our nervous system. So we're talking about how that plays out in healthcare, how that plays out at work. We're going to do another community bright spotting panel next month. And for our book chat, we will be hearing from local All Brains Belong community member Matt Mulligan and his book Tomatoes and Peppers about what happens when the societal environmental conditions either nourish growth or are like the wrong acidity and all the things that go on. It's a metaphor for life using gardening. Great book. All right, so before we start our tonight's presentation, big thank you to our Brain Club supporters who have supported us this month and any month. Thank you for making it possible for us to continue this program week after week. All right, so I am going to stop share and reshare with volume because I forgot to do that. All right, here we go. This book. Anchored is written by Deb Dana, who is a clinician, a consultant, and an author, of course, specializing in polyvagal theory. So polyvagal theory was developed by Dr. Stephen Porges, and so Deb Dana collaborates with Dr. Porges. And what polyvagal theory really is, and I think one of our video clips talks about this, but it's the idea of a more nuanced and sophisticated and accurate understanding of the autonomic nervous system. It's the idea that there is a predictable way that the autonomic or automatic part of the nervous system functions. And so that's what this book's about. It's really about it's like a guide to understanding how our nervous system shapes our daily experiences and translates the science of that into everyday life. I had a slide about that. Who knew? So the other thing that's really interesting about this book is that there are a number of experiential prompts and practices to explore your own nervous system and how to have like some exercises or practices about how to like shift different parts of the nervous system, which are very interesting. We're not going to do there's like one I'll show you that is maybe less deep, but we're mostly not going to get into practices so that we can keep this in the education space. It might get too confusing if we're practicing therapeutic activities, but it's got a lot of really interesting techniques. Why we almost didn't do this book chat and why our advisory committee had to really think about whether we want to do this book chat, it's because the nervous system is complicated. And given that the majority of our community
has suffered relational trauma of one form or another. When we think about the nuances of an autonomic nervous system that is constantly in fight, flight, or freeze, related to past trauma and the post-traumatic or complex post-traumatic uh, results of relational trauma. We thought we could talk about the science of the nervous system without getting into the therapeutic space. We don't want to be in the therapeutic space today, even though we do that in other programs. We wanted to not be in that space today because we don't have longitudinal relationships with most of you, and it can be not safe to like start dabbling in therapeutic things without having good follow-up and good safe relationships. So we're gonna stay. It's gonna be hard, but we're gonna stay in the classroom type of approach to understanding the autonomic nervous system. If you've missed our other January brain clubs, I'm going to do a recap of kind of like the basics of the nervous system. So, what we covered the first week of January is that the autonomic nervous system governs our internal body processes, these things that happen automatically. So, your heartbeat, your blood pressure, your digestion, and basically the autonomic nervous system's role is to store, release, and conserve energy and help us move safely through life. And what's really a lot of people like feel like their nervous system is controlling them, and they feel like it's like greatly mysterious and troublesome to people. And so that's because often we don't understand it. When we do understand our autonomic nervous system, we can learn how to work with it, and that's what this book is about. Hold on, I need the book to be open. All right. My mouse. What just happened? Here we go. Sorry. All right. So I'm going to read this book I'm not going to read the whole book to you. I'm going to read this quote from the book. So Deb Dana writes, a polyvagal informed understanding of our feelings, thoughts, and behaviors offers us a way to be with our experiences instead of being hijacked by them. And certainly, we hear from lots of people that that's their experience. They feel like their nervous system is hijacking their experience. So I'm gonna read the rest of this paragraph. When we're flooded by our emotions, we lose connection to regulation and lose the ability for reflection. From an anchor in safety and regulation, we can connect to our states and listen to our stories with the distance needed for reflection. So the idea of developing a scientific understanding of your nervous system is so that there can be this neutral way of discussing, exploring, understanding what goes on in everyday life. So, what Deb Dana outlines in this book is that the autonomic nervous system has, hold on, I'm gonna go. Um, the autonomic nervous system has these three principles. This is what's outlined in this book. So, hierarchy. And what the hierarchy means is that the states of the nervous system like proceed in a particular order. And we're going to look at a graphic on the next slide to better understand that. But that the autonomic nervous system has these three states. There is the ventral vagal. So vagal refers to the vagus nerve. So one branch of the vagus nerve is associated with safety and connection. There's the sympathetic nervous system. So the vagus nerve is associated with the parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system, that fight flight, that's kind of what it gets a rap for. But what is often kind of what's new in the polyvagal theory world is that it's not as simple as parasympathetic versus sympathetic. Instead, the vagus nerve has these two branches. One is safety connection, one is shutdown and collapse. And so we move through these three states in a predictable order. And that's what the hierarchy means, and predictable order based on how safe or threatened we feel. And we'll look at that. She talks about neuroception. Neuroception is our threat detection system. Subconsciously, the nervous system is constantly scanning the environment for cues of danger or threat, or cues of safety. It's beneath our conscious awareness. It's not something we're aware of, it just happening automatically and really reacting to things in the external environment and the internal environment. And lastly, co-regulation. And we talk about this all the time at Brain Club, that human beings are wired for connection and rely on relationships to regulate their nervous system. There's a lot of mythology about regulation, like, oh, well, you're 5 years old, you should have self-regulation skills. Oh my gosh, we all need other nervous systems to regulate. And in fact, later we'll look at an excerpt from the book that talks about how failure to have safe co-regulating experiences in early life really does interfere with developing self-regulation skills. But even when you have self-regulation skills, we still need co-regulation. Co-regulation creates a sense of safety and I don't really like the word resilience, but anyway, because it's buzzwordy and stuff, and it like makes it feel like it's a characteristic of an individual as opposed to really like we need community. So I like this quote. Let me flip to the page. I decided not to put a million words on the slide, but I think this might be one that I wanted to read more of. All right, so without, so you can think of neuroception as autonomic intuition, right? So many of us have been taught to override our intuition, often as young children, like, hey, I think this is bad. It's not bad. I think it's hot. It's not hot. I think it's cold. It's not cold. I think it's loud. It's not loud, right? So we've been overriding our intuition and our sense of like appraising our own internal experience even. And so often that is an important thing for adults to then like have to unlearn and relearn, is reconnecting with intuition. Deb Dana writes, without awareness, neuroception works in the background, serving our survival and shaping our days. It is when we bring perception to neuroception that we have access to perspective. By adding perception to the autonomic process of neuroception, we're no longer simply in the state. We are now able to be with it, observe it, reflect on the experience. I'm going to play a short video clip. This is Deb Dana talking about how the nervous system affects our daily life. Stop share. I like really need to figure out my computer better. Here we go. All right, we're gonna rewind. And I'm gonna reshare my screen. Yes, Liz, I agree. We all need continual co-regulation. Share sound. Here we go. Just gonna watch 3 minutes of this.
Hi, Deb.
Hello, how are you?
So you have spent a lot of your work paying attention to how the nervous system affects us, how we respond to situations. You've done that within the framework of therapy. Now let's pay attention to how this kind of learning could inspire us in the way we lead our lives.
Yes, it's a thank you for this invitation to try and translate my clinical language into everyday, ordinary, user-friendly language for what I've begun to start calling just curious human beings. Because in my trainings recently, I've had many people come who they just want to know about their nervous system, just want to kind of figure out what is this thing that's helping me navigate my life. So what I guess I would say in the beginning is that the nervous system is the foundation for all of us. It's where all of our experience begins. And so I think it's helpful for everyone to understand this system that's driving them in certain ways through their daily daily lives. It's not just something that we want to pay attention to in therapy. It's not a and actually, in the therapy that I do, what I'm trying to do is help people become active operators of their own nervous systems. So I think that's really what I'm hoping, is that everybody will, know enough about their own nervous system and how it works, so that they can then be able to befriend it and engage with it in new ways.
Yeah, yeah. And so maybe an entry point there is to say that the nervous system is going to be responding very differently when we're in a situation where we're safe versus when there is a sense of threat.
Yes, and that perception of safety then allows us to do what you and I are doing right now, to communicate, to connect, even though it's across a screen, to share this experience together and be in it together. And then a sense of danger moves us into a state of protection, and we either feel some anxiety, or we feel some anger. We want to get big and stand our ground and fight back, or we're ready to run away and get out of here. Or the other response that this brilliantly creative biology brings to us is this place of just giving up, of sort of I don't care, give up, whatever sort of place. So yes, depending on how we're perceiving the world at any moment, our nervous system is going to bring one of those energies to life inside us. So, those are sort of the three building blocks of our nervous system, right? We've got that.
Oh my goodness, I actually transitioned back to slides without closing the window for the first time ever, I think. All right, so this is what the building blocks that she's alluding to are like. So there's the down, and it's really about the when we use the word hierarchy before, imagine there's like boxes, like they're blocks that are stacking. So dorsal vagal, that's that threat response where we are immobilized, shut down, collapsed. The only way to get from that, or dissociated, that's another way that dorsal vagal presents. The only way to get from that to ventral vagal, the safe, connected, engaging, that kind of vagal, you have to move through this one. That is what the principle of hierarchy means. So here we are in shutdown, collapse, dissociation. We have to move through mobilization, action taking. We have to move through fight and flight. Then we can move into the state of ventral vagal. So you can't go directly from dorsal vagal to ventral vagal. You have to move through this one. That was new information for me, and I found that really helpful to think about. And like, oh yeah, of course that makes sense. But in my own life now, having this lens of understanding, you're like, oh, I got it, okay. As opposed to just, yeah, it's like random when I can get from here to here. It's not random. It has to move through here. So this is a slide that we shared with you the first week of January. These were some of the I thought, really awesome quotes that the author has that have just neutral language. My autonomic nervous system is activated. There's no judgment, there's no connotations, there's no, it just is. My autonomic nervous system's activated. I'm having a survival response or a protection response. That's what dorsal vagal and sympathetic drive are about. So survival response, having a survival response. My body is trying to send me a message. Just simply, once you get a little bit more self-awareness, and you can match how do you, and there's exercises in the book that kind of teach you how to figure out what state you're in. But just to name, if you developed that awareness, I am in the sympathetic activation state. I am in the dorsal vagal state. I'm in the ventral vagal state. Just neutral. Here I am. But maybe take some practice. I also really appreciate this quote. Hold on. We need to remember that well-being is not defined by a nervous system that is always in regulation. A nervous system that brings qualities of well-being still dysregulates, but rather than remaining stuck in a survival response, it finds its way back to regulation through flexibility and resilience. So it's the idea of shifting from state to state and the more nuanced moves that happen even within one state. She refers to the idea of an autonomic journey, where there's react, something happens, you react to it, and then return to regulation. And then maybe later there can be some reflection around that. So it's just well-being is the flexibility, the idea, the ability to shift between states and recover. And so it's not about avoiding dysregulation. It's just learning how to navigate it. So I mentioned there are these experiential exercises, and so this one is probably the simplest one. So I wanted to share this one. There's for all of them though, there are these prompts to ask yourself as you're like exploring your autonomic nervous system. But just the idea of, here you are, where am I? What's happening in my environment? Who's around? What am I doing? What state has been activated? Just these, a lot of times we're just all caught up in doing all the things, but just like slowing down and just, where am I? What's around me? What am I doing? What messages is my nervous system sending me? So that's an example. But that's a chapter 1 exercise. So the exercises that go throughout the book get increasingly more nuanced. There's a chapter called Longing for Connection. Let me pull that one up. We come into the world wired for connection. With our first breath, we embark on a lifelong quest to feel safe in our bodies, in our environments, and in our relationships with others. We are born needing to be welcomed by another human being, and this essential need lasts for a lifetime. When basic survival needs are met, but there's no safe and predictable sense of connection to another person, without those connections, we have more difficulty regulating emotions, experience low self-esteem, and struggle to create lasting, healthy relationships. And while we may give up the active search for people to connect with, our nervous system never stops looking for, waiting for, and longing for connection. Until the day we die, we long for safe and reliable connections. Co-regulation is essential, first for survival, and then for living a life of well-being. I'll leave one more paragraph. We are wired for connection, wish for connection, and wait for connection. And yet, so often, it's been in our connections that we have felt not seen, not understood, not welcomed, and not safe. And so, the biological consequences of that is to develop these protection responses or survival responses in the sympathetic activation and dorsal vagal states. If you're interested in that topic as the idea of social connection and survival and social connection as medicine, Lizzie's going to drop a link to Brain Club from last year with our community advisory board member, Sarah Knutson, sharing a really powerful presentation on this topic. I'm just noting in the chat, Steve says, I appreciate the quote about flexibility and the ability to move between states and recover. It helps to paint a picture of part of what good autistic ADHD, etc. health might look like. I love that observation. Yes, exactly. Because I think there's also this mythology. I mean, it starts in childhood. You're like, don't cry, you shouldn't be crying, stop crying. It's like, actually, I'm crying because I'm regulating. This is how my body is trying to regulate and move through my states. And it's just the idea that you're always supposed to look calm or be calm or whatever. It's just, it's not based in science, but those were the messages that so many of us got. Yes, Bruno, I agree that Sarah's presentation was awesome. So actually related to that comment about kids getting the wrong message, without the early experiences of safely co-regulating, self-regulating strategies are created as a survival response. So that's the sympathetic activation and dorsal vagal responses. So we don't have safe co-regulation experiences. We're trying to self-regulate, but we don't they end up being strategies that are not they're not adaptive in terms of we don't learn the skills of coming back from them. We get into them and we stay stuck in them. We stay stuck in sympathetic activation. We're stuck in dorsal vagal. While we may look like we're doing well, our internal experience may be one of sympathetically driven fear. So, often we'll talk about with our patients that how someone's internal experience may very well not match their external experience, and I think that's really common. But mostly or partially, what that is about is that it's not been safe to show on the outside what an internal experience is. Let me see if there's anything else from this page. Yeah, I think that's good. So Deb Dana distinguishes between social support and social connection. Social support comes from the people we can count on to show up and help us in concrete ways, and who make it possible for us to manage our daily living. Social connection, on the other hand, comes from the people in our life we know and who know us in deep ways. This is the person we call when we're feeling distressed and need someone to sit quietly with us without offering advice. The person who understands our need to rant sometimes and celebrates us when life is good. Socially connected relationships are filled with reciprocity. With social connection, we give and take, offer and receive. There's rhythm to the relationships. When we build a pattern of acting from a survival state, we suffer both physically and psychologically. We may be successful in the world, but we don't feel satisfied or find joy in our experiences. All right, I'm gonna wrap up with one more video. This one's really short.
When I look at these systems that are so big and overwhelming to me, and I don't know where to go, I come back here because this is where I can be responsible. And if I am in a place of biological regulation, I am putting that energy out into the world. And every being around me, every nervous system around me feels that. Right? There's a transmission that happens nervous system to nervous system, whether I'm talking as we are or whether I'm just moving through the world. And I think that is a powerful thing for us to recognize, that we're responsible for the autonomic information we're putting out into the world. And when we walk through the world from this place of regulation, we are letting every being around us know that we are safe and inviting them to feel that and come into connection. And I think, I joke, I say we change the world one nervous system at a time, but I do think this is how it begins. And we get enough, a critical mass of people who are feeling safe enough. And none of us feel this all the time. We all move into survival and find our way back to safety. That happens all the time, normal, expected experience, but not getting stuck in survival, coming back to safety. And when enough of us can do that, then I think the systems will begin to change, and we will have people in leadership positions and who can go in and say, here is how these systems can change.
On that note, we can open this up to Liz, that's funny. Open this up to discussion. I'd love to hear what has stood out to you. What are you taking away from this conversation, these excerpts, these videos? I see are filled with reciprocity that feel.
I don't think we need to watch our discussion from last time while we're here. We can have a fresh one. I guess I'll repeat myself. I'd love to know what is standing out to anyone. Emily says I really like the neutral statements about what's going on in the nervous system. Yeah, that's I'm gonna try to pull up. I had it. I was typing that in the chat before I had to like pay attention to the screen. About the Brain Club we did at the beginning of January on Nervous System 101. But I'm gonna try to pull up slides from that because I think that's like one thing that we did well in that Brain Club. Because we had a whole slide of neutral language. Here we go. This is like the fastest technology thing I've ever done in my whole life. So very similarly to how Kirsty's talking about with young children being like, my nervous system's activated. It's neutral. It's not shamey. It's not judgy. It happens to everyone. So we can still do this as adults. My nervous system is activated. I am having a survival response. My body's trying to send me a message. Certainly we can get more specific. I am in the blank state, but we don't need to be that specific. I am dysregulated. Reagan says, I love the idea of changing the world one nervous system at a time. Yeah, I love that part. I totally seek opportunities to co-regulate. This gave great language for that experience. It's awesome, Reagan. Susan says the goal of not being regulated is quite radical. Perhaps I'm too focused on regulation. Well, Susan, like why is that? It's like society tells you that. Society's like, be calm. Like, first off, it uses regulation out of context. Like society tells you to be calm, which is regulated doesn't necessarily need to be calm. It's that all the parts of your brain and body are working together. And that's it. And so we're not always going to be regulated. It's not realistic to be regulated. It's about how do we return. We get dysregulated, we recognize it, return. Sierra.
Yeah, I think on that note, I think one of the frameworks I really liked about this book and this like framework of the nervous system is the like giving permission to let my body and my nervous system and my brain do what they automatically want to do, but what I generally suppress because of whatever, because of societal norms or whatever it is, like giving permission to like stim or whatever that looks like. And I think to me that feels kind of like the framework of like the energy meter from Autism Level Up, of the idea of like I don't want to be like regulated. I don't want to be like in one certain energy all the time. I want my energy to match the task that I'm trying to do. And that might mean raising or lowering my energy to get to that point. Or matching the task to where my nervous system is. Yeah, my thoughts.
Absolutely. I'm going to put that in the chat. So Autism Level Up, I think about their work as like universal design for nervous system regulation, and all and they don't talk about emotion words because those don't mean anything to a lot of brains. It's about energy, and all energy is okay. It's just that we the what the Autism Level Up tools talk about is just the idea of finding, as Sierra says, a match between the energy where you are and the energy required for what you're trying to do. Martha.
So when we're trying to express to someone that our sensory system is being overloaded by too much noise, and we use this kind of terminology, if I understand you correctly, about our dysregulation and all that, how does the person who doesn't know this kind of language get the message?
Totally. So, and I think that like
I can't hear you.
Ooh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think that it's not just regulation, it's everything. It's like when one party is doing the work of learning about themselves and learning about the brains, learning about their nervous systems, learning about their environment, like their access needs, like one person's doing the work and one person's not. Um, what happens? So what we'd hope is that the person who doesn't know this language says, "What does that mean?" And you tell them. But often that's not the response. Often there's like "What are you talking about? Like, what are you talking about?" Right? And so you can't make anyone understand. You can't make anyone change their behavior. All you can do is name the thing you've learned. All you can do is articulate a boundary, and they can do the work or they cannot do the work. And what is my hope is that, like, that you or anyone begins to shift the more time you spend with more people who know your language, that you can talk about these things with, so that when someone like shames you for like learning about yourself and sharing it, somebody shames you for that, you can recognize that like that's what they're doing. They're shaming you. Like, I don't have time for that. Where you can opt out from interactions where you're disrespected in that way. And it's really hard, and it's really frustrating, and it's really awful. Ugh. Oh, sorry, I missed a lot in the chat. Hold on, let me catch up on this. Alvar says, "I've used my autonomic nervous system as activated at least a few times since January Brain Club." I love that. I also joke that my body seems incapable of rest or digest since I don't sleep well and have gastroparesis, which is delayed gastric emptying. Yeah, right. So when you're nervous, and when you have a nervous system, like many of the members of this community, you have a nervous system that is taking in a lot more information from the environment and having, responses. Um, when we have neuroimmune responses like gastroparesis, it's just sort of having to acknowledge that when the environmental conditions around us are unsafe, our body will try to get our attention. Yeah, and I agree with the way Sierra responded to Jason's question. I'm gonna wrap us up by reading Liz's comment. To go back to the month-long theme of a matter of trust, if someone isn't interested in knowing what's going on with me, I know I can't trust them. And I look for folks who are open and curious to this language, this framework, and making those moves have been really positive. I cannot imagine a better way to wrap this up. Thank you all so much. Thank you for being here. We'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday as we start exploring our theme of rest as resistance. Thanks, everybody. Bye.